Hello and welcome to ATARC's 2021 Low Code Application Virtual Summit. My name is Kirsten Patton and I am the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC and the MC of today's event. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We are a nonprofit organization that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to thank our partners over at Software AG Government Solutions and CompuWare, both truly great partners at ATARC. I would also like to thank our awesome panelists and moderators for today. Additionally, I would like to thank you all for joining us. Today will be a day full of action-packed panels, all surrounding low code in the federal space. We hope you enjoy this great and informative day. Up first, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Ed D'Augialo. Ed is the Principal Solutions Architect over at the United States Department of Transportation. Over to you, Ed.
Good morning, can you hear, or good afternoon, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Good afternoon, my name is Edward D'Augialo and I work for the Federal Transit Administration, which is a sub-agency of the Department of Transportation. The Federal Transit Administration's mission is to improve public transportation in America's communities. We do that through three areas. The first area is capital investments or grant making. We have a focus on safety for public transportation. And then the third area is supporting research for the innovation of public transportation. That's understanding ideas like mobility on demand and how things like Uber can support communities to provide transportation. At FTA, we currently have two low-code platforms we leverage to address external needs and internal needs through something we call a customer support program. So internally, we have people who can submit requests to do their procurements, ask for an office chair, or even ask for IT needs. And then on the outside, for external solutions, we do FTA grant making as an example, focusing on the awarding and monitoring of approximately $12 billion of grants to local transit authorities each year. The FTA started using low code in 2012 to support these activities and has developed two mission critical systems for grant making: the National Transit Database, which collects transit data used to calculate apportionments for a transit award management system. And additionally, another system is about to go live this month, finally, called the OTRAC system. And that's going to serve as the official record for all oversight activities with our grant system. These platforms have allowed us to digitize ourselves and serve our user base efficiently during this pandemic. Over the last 8 years, our low-code platforms have allowed us to break down the silos in our data and move data into a consolidated platform where all applications can access information and leverage it, and force us to think more about how all of this information works together. We moved to incremental delivery with Agile, and so all of our software systems that are in maintenance have 2-week release cycles, so we do about 26 releases per system per year. Newer systems operate a little bit differently depending on what an MVP is defined as before they go live. And then, we had a 50% cost reduction in security assessments. We've improved our security posture with cloud solutions for low code that we're leveraging. And we're able to be more responsive to our user base when they come to us asking us to deliver small applications for them. So we've seen, development-wise, we've been able to build an MVP of a small application in about 2 weeks, and then have it fully ready and production ready in another 2 weeks. But then the challenge is everything else around that, which is something I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. Low code is a piece of the solution for the enterprise for big government, but what you have to remember is that it's a part of the solution. So the infrastructure that supports low code is just as important. And it has been the key to how we've succeeded at the Federal Transit Administration. Infrastructure is a foundation in the physical and digital world when you try to scale large projects. Paving a driveway is much easier than trying to build an interstate highway. As a nation, we've seen a greater discussion around the investment in America where the Department of Transportation can play a larger role in our nation's infrastructure, the roads, the rails, the bridges that connect and enable our commerce. And that's why I think infrastructure is really important to the Department of Transportation, because the word can have dual meanings. You know, you can talk about what's going on with the country, and then, like, you know, for us, what we're doing internally, there's also meaning. So infrastructure is the organizational structures and tools needed for the operation of a society or an enterprise. And so, you know, I want to look at a transportation project as an example, and I'll relate that then to how we do some IT work to kind of accentuate this. So, you know, one of the biggest projects our country ever undertook when it came to supporting transportation was actually the Panama Canal. This was before the Department of Transportation even existed, because that was started by Lyndon B. Johnson in 1966. The Panama Canal, of course, was built to bridge the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans so that ships didn't have to sail around South America. This idea began under President Ulysses S. Grant, who sent 7 expeditions to do feasibility studies on the canal itself. And, you know, the main driver of that, I think, was that, you know, if we had a canal, then our fleet would be more able to jump between the Atlantic and Pacific. So strategically, there were a lot of benefits to having a canal. The French were actually the first to attempt to build the project. So they started it in 1881, and it lasted till 1896. The French, of course, did not successfully build it. They ran into a lot of cost overruns and eventually failed the project. The project was actually run as a private project, where they funded money from private French citizens to try and build this. The United States eventually took over the project in 1902 and began excavation in 1904, completing the project in 1914. The United States was able to make progress faster and execute the project in a shorter time frame. So if we look back at the French, though, there's some interesting things going on. So the French were led by a guy named Ferdinand de Lesseps. He was an engineer who was very charismatic and created a lot of nationalism and excitement around the project, which is why he was able to get a large amount of private funding to move forward with it. Ferdinand, before he had done the canal project, had actually completed the Suez Canal. And the Suez Canal, of course, is what connects the Mediterranean and Red Sea. He was known as a great engineer, despite his lack of technical and financial knowledge. Prior to deciding on the Panama Canal, the French reviewed multiple proposals for where it could be. They thought about Nicaragua and things like that before choosing Panama. Lesseps would ultimately decide to build a sea-level canal through Panama. That was the design choice he made. He believed that he could reproduce the same results that he had with the Suez Canal. The French eventually failed in this attempt. They only got 2/5 of the way through, and they spent $234 million. And those are present-day dollars to try and do this. The French would eventually sell this canal to the United States for $40 million. This included the Panama Railroad, and at the time, it was the largest real estate transaction ever up to that point in history. President Roosevelt was the president at the time, and he appointed a guy named John Wallace as the chief engineer of the project. However, Wallace would resign a year later because of bureaucracy and deadlock over how to construct it. After Wallace left, though, we had the person that was the catalyst that enabled the success. And his name was John Stevens. And he was the chief engineer and expert in railroads. Stevens was dispatched in 1905 by Roosevelt to survey the Panama Canal. Stevens would look at it firsthand and see the challenges where there was high amounts of rainfall that resulted in landslides and floods when they were trying to dig stuff out of it. The influences of Stevens' expeditions paved the way to understanding the Panama territory and moved towards a different design of a lock canal instead of the French design of a sea-level canal. This project was really, really important in America, too. You know, in November 9th of 1906, Theodore Roosevelt became the first president to ever leave the country as the acting president to go and look at the Panama Canal. He was escorted down on 2 warships. They weren't really even sure how to handle this because it was unprecedented. You know, Roosevelt wanted to see this canal personally, and he wanted to understand the challenges, and he wanted to insert his backing behind it. There's a book written by David McCullough called The Pathway Between the Two Seas. And in it, he talks about this. Advanced preparation involved the efforts of thousands of people. Streets were scrubbed, houses were painted or whitewashed, flags were hung from windows and balconies, programs were presented, school children were rehearsed in patriotic airs. The Republic of Panama declared this day of arrival a national day of joy and exultant enthusiasm, and instructed the populace to behave, since all thinkers, sociologists, and philosophers of the universe will have their eyes upon us in a penetrating scrutiny. This project was a big deal. So what enabled the United States to succeed with it was the things that John Stevens did. So he leveraged his knowledge of railroads to strengthen the support of work occurring along the Panama Canal. Stevens stood over the Culebra Cut, which was where they were digging the canal. And he looked and he counted. He saw 7 cars sitting off the train tracks. And every steam shovel was sitting idle because all the laborers were busy trying to get the trains back on the tracks. Stevens discovered one of the key issues leading to worker inefficiency was a lack of care for the railroads, which were needed to excavate the dirt. Stevens brought an expert on railroads and proceeded to upgrade the railroads with stronger tracks, better bridges, double tracking, and rehabilitated all the equipment. The new railroad would act as the main piece of infrastructure to transfer people, goods, and dirt around the canal. It increased the efficiency in which dirt was removed from the canal and was a major turning point in the project. The other main area of challenge was disease, specifically malaria and yellow fever, which was an unanticipated problem that interfered with the French attempt. Records of the French construction of the canal calculate that roughly 22,000 people died of disease, whereas on the American side, only about 5,600 deaths were recorded. The Americans were able to reduce the death count by having better infrastructure around the railroad with towns that provided water, housing, and medical care. During the French attempt, buckets of water and mudslides from dirt sliding back into the canal from rainfall were attracting mosquitoes, which was what was causing higher amounts of malaria and yellow fever to infect the workers. The French that had already done a similar project thought they could take what they learned and succeed with the Panama Canal. That didn't end up happening because they failed to recognize they needed infrastructure that made poor design choices with the sea level instead of the lock canal. Panama wasn't about how fast you could dig, but about building a railroad, a town to support the workers, and mitigating disease. When I think of low code at my agency, I think of it as the tool that the steam shovel to dig the dirt. I want to dig dirt as fast as possible, but I need the rest of the infrastructure to allow me to move that dirt and support the people that are doing this stuff. Low code enables fast development, but if you can build an application in 1 second, there's still other challenges you need to solve. I mean, in my agency, I just created this list of a couple of things that we went through. So procurement, if you can build faster, how do you allow for the unknown scope to authorize new items to be done in existing work orders? And, you know, we had this challenge on our BPA and left some language in our newer work orders to enable small projects on a labor hour basis. Supporting Agile to build faster. Your organization may need change management support on the business lines so they can provide resources to aid you in building faster. People need to be able to provide requirements and validate what was built meets their needs. At FTA, we had to rewrite our SDLC to enable Agile and train all our contractors and IT employees on that, and also think of engagement strategies for different business lines that were tailored depending on what was going on in those projects. Adopting DevOps practices, such as automated testing and automated deployments. All of our systems have automated testing, and we can run them to validate our applications are working correctly after various maintenance outages, such as infrastructure changes. Testing faster and deploying in a consistent way allows you to build faster. Each new system may require an authority to operate. This is a security requirement. We cut down on our ATO by ATOing a platform and deploying all apps to the same set of machines in the cloud. As long as we stay within these guardrails of data privacy and do not add additional custom code, we're able to just update documentation for the overall ATO to go live with new applications. Low code plus our infrastructure is what enables us to be fast and more responsive. And, you know, it's benefited us in the following ways too. Like, you know, in that a little bit. FTA found that a greater amount of functionality could be developed in approximately half the amount of development time when compared to previous technologies. This has benefited us in several ways. The time frame to address user feedback has significantly decreased. FTA development teams were able to quickly incorporate numerous user experience changes. Our organization was able to quickly respond to the emerging pandemic. We've developed some COVID tracking tools for enterprise use. And the ability of a shared database has assisted us in breaking these data silos and enabled FTA to enhance our overall data visualization and analysis capabilities. FTA has also found the low-code platform increases the ability to adopt an agile methodology. As the number of applications grew, the development teams soon adopted a Scrum format to ensure the development activities were coordinated and there was increased transparency. The overall technology governance model became streamlined and even featured 50% cost reductions in security assessments as applications were now contained on a singular platform rather than several disparate systems. Practitioners soon spoke a common technology lexicon because of our Scrum, which has not only increased the understanding, but also cross-collaboration and knowledge sharing amongst the different development teams. FTA's approach to enterprise development and management enabled us also to be critical players in the nation's pandemic response. The COVID-19 crisis put significant strain on transit systems, leading to legislation allocation of an additional $25 billion as part of the Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act. The swift distribution of this funding was essential for the health of the U.S. transit system. Due to our transformation, vision, and execution, process efficiencies were in place, and FTA was able to scale up and have rapid impact in supporting transit authorities across the country through distribution of these critical grants. The ability to rally around the common goal using the low-code platform serves as a model for efficiency and effectiveness within the public domain. Please remember in your low-code journeys that the infrastructure you surround your tools with will be as important of a key factor to your success. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. That was awesome. We really appreciate it. Up next, we are going to have our first panel of the day, which I have the pleasure of moderating. So I would like to welcome you all to our first panel at ATARC Summit, where we'll chat through low code and the importance of it, as well as implementing it throughout the federal government. So we've got a really great panel here today. I'm going to ask all my panelists to please turn their cameras on, turn their audio on, and we'll get started. So first, I'm going to go through and introduce each of them briefly. So I'm going to call your name. If you could just wave to our audience. Hassan Yazar is first. He is the Technical Director and Adjunct faculty member of Continuous Deployment of Capability at the Software Engineering Institute within Carnegie Mellon University. And we also have David Rubens, who is the Project Delivery Manager within the Office of Consumer Response at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We also have Elisa Foella, who is with TTS Cybersecurity Advisor at the U.S. General Services Administration. We also have Christopher Colvin, who is a Program Analyst at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And last but not least, of course, we have Claire Bailey, who is the Director of Federal, State, and Local Solutions at CompuWare. So first, we're going to have each panelist, we're going to go around and have them tell us a little bit more about themselves and their work with low code and what it is that they're up to. So before we jump into questions, how about Hassan, could you please kick us off?
Thank you so much, Kristen. It's nice to be part of this great panel, and I'm glad to hear that good stories about the low code. So what I have been doing in this space, I'm managing the Devops and Agile group at SCI, which is part of the Carnegie Mellon. SCI, Software Engineering Institute, is FFRDCs. So one of our role is really advising or reviewing or giving a guidance, and mainly for Department of Defense, and about the tool perspective, about platform perspective, that's really aligned with the DevOps and DevSecOps mindset. That's kind of my day-to-day job. And at the same time, I have been teaching DevOps courses at the CMU since 2015. When I teach that, I'm hearing a lot of kind of new terms. Somebody says it's in a hype. some people are saying, is it real? Kind of like how we are talking about DevOps, now the low code is becoming a reality. So my experience in low code is really, as I said, not really using at the SCI/CMU, but more about analyzing with respect to the engineering practices and addressing some scalability problems, some security issues, and also what are the evaluation criteria are, because we don't want to just go and pick up the tools based on that, what we are seeing as the kind of a name. It's more about find out why we need to use the tools. What is the purpose of the tools? What is the business application that we would like to achieve, and tie into the low code so we can really go into the platform and achieve our mission. That's what we are trying to do in SCI. That's kind of my day-to-day job.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Can we please hear from David next?
Absolutely. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. So yeah, my name is David Rubens, and I'm a project delivery manager with the Office of Consumer Response at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So I have about 20 years of experience with the federal government, both as a vendor, as a consultant, and also as a federal employee. I am currently responsible for system architecture, development, and strategic projects for the Bureau's Consumer Complaint Management System, which is built on a low-code platform, Salesforce. For the past 10 years, I've been working with low-code platforms, specifically Salesforce, which I helped to implement both at the General Services Administration as well as at the CFPB. So I'm very glad to be here today to talk about low-code.
Thanks, David. How about Elisa next?
Yes, my name is Elisa Fiola, pronounced she, her, and I am coming from General Service Administration, the Technology Transformation Services, where we look to do digital modernization for other federal agencies, and I support our internal group and making sure that we have the appropriate tools so we can do all those wonderful journeys to modernizing. And we have adopted a couple low and no code tools within our tool set that we look to deploy and transform some of the manual and tedious processes that we do internally so that we can deliver products in a much more agile and iterative kind of activity.
Thank you. And then how about you, Christopher? Could you please come on camera and share with us?
Hey, yep, thank you. So I'm Chris Colvin, and I'm a program analyst with Veterans Benefits Administration, and also a contract officer representative for a Salesforce COE contract. And so we have about 5 projects in flight on that contract, all of them delivering low code, no code solutions to different clients throughout Veterans Benefits Administration. And then on the side, I also do citizen development to build no code solutions in Salesforce for different clients throughout Veterans Benefits Administration as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Claire, over to you.
Hi, I am Claire Bailey, and I'm the Director of Federal, State, and Local Solutions for CompuWare, and we're now a BMC company. And as we, the beauty of what I get to do in my day-to-day world is look across the country, both at the federal level, but across state governments, and how we can harness that capability and enable multiple platforms from your distributed all the way up to your mainframe, and make sure that we're enabling an architecture that is very flexible. So I'll come from the background, and for that to kind of capitalize on what Ed said, or what I interpreted, low code, no code is not a zero sum game. What can you do to enable your developers through architecture, through tools, and ensure that you've got the automation components that can help you be very successful as you deploy these applications. It's all about how can we all work together to improve the delivery of services to the citizens we serve. So that's a little bit about me. I do come from a government background with the great state of Arkansas as their Chief Technology Officer before I rejoined the private sector world. So great to be here today with this great panelist group.
Excellent, thank you. So before we begin with the question and answer section, I just want to encourage the audience to please submit their questions in the Q&A chat at the bottom of the platform. We'll be going through them during and after this panel, so please feel free to send them as we go. So with that, I think we should just go ahead and jump into it. And I want to direct my first question over to Hassan, and that is, what to you is the importance of low code, and why is the implementation of it in the government important for the federal government workforce?
Thanks, Kristen. I looked at the low code as kind of a necessity. Why is that important? There is a huge demand on the software that we are building. So we are building an application as an engineer. I have been writing code for almost 25 years. It's always challenging to get the business needs and on time and align with the objective that we would like to achieve, which is, let's put this one in a place, because that's how DevOps movement start as an example. But it's always difficult to get the needs of the business that we would like to achieve as a functionality. So software is growing, but when we look at the engineering sources or developers, it's very, very low. Like statistics right now, we have 0.3% of the world population as an engineers, like 0.3%, versus consumers, billions. So think about that scale and how we are expecting that engineers, as like us, so technical folks, managers or architects, will achieve the necessity of the building an application. It's impossible. There is no way we can address that demand in a high quality. It's a couple of things. High quality and security is very difficult. So I looked at the low code and no code platform. It's more about addressing the demand of the software requirements that people can deliver it, which is a creative. So which is kind of addressing the need of the engineers. I know we need an engineers, but let engineer focus on building a reusable component, building a platform everybody can use it, which is one element. Second one, I looked at the why is the low code is important. It's more about the creativity. So what really that means for creativity is, like we always design engineering thinking, but there are a lot of great people in our community. They know they are more creative than engineers. Again, why don't we give an opportunity for these people? They are more creative. They are more creative in terms of creating some usefulness for their needs. Maybe they're going to stand up some web application. Maybe they're going to stand up some mobile application for their needs. Maybe they can do the better design. So like give them an opportunity for these folks, and they are more creative and building an application, which that can achieve from the low code platform as well. There's a lot of stories, like young generation, sometimes, you know, some capable people, they will deliver the web application in a short time frame and creating an impact for the human life. There are a lot of stories on this one, so which is another good benefits of low code. So when you look at these two perspectives, it's a reality. It is addressing the high demand, high challenge, and for the needs of the application. So that's kind of like a very important topic, and find out what needs to be done and low code perspective, what's important. So let's go back to DoD now. So in DoD perspective, there's a lot of demand for the software application as well. There's a business side of the house. We're not talking about the complex systems yet because there's a different topic, but mainly for business application, we have been paying so much money, so much fees for the same type of application over and over and again. Now you're looking for how can we save a time for the licensing for other components and also reusability. And second element is how can we get ATU and approval in a short time frame, which Ed kind of a little bit talk about in the what ATU is important, authoritative operate. It's also giving much easier for a platform that we are building, because once we get an approval for a platform, it's much easier to build an application to meet the business, because we're not going over and over and again for each capabilities, because we already using the same platform. It's going to speed up a lot of approval process. So there is a need on the business side of the DoD, reusing the platform, using application for main approval for ATO, at the same time for agility, because we are going agile world right now, right? So we're talking about the needs. That's where we can really get early feedback and from end users and let them get their ideas, what that means, what the design it is, it's going to work or not, without paying a lot of time and money. Let's reuse that capability for this. So I'm going to stop here. We can continue again for the topics.
Well, thank you. I think you covered a lot there, and I appreciate your answer. And from any of our other panelists, is there anything that you would like to add to, what you see as the importance of low code and why its implementation in the government is super important for the federal workforce?
Yeah, I could jump in a little bit there. I think the reusability concept is a major value add. I think it's rare to see a low-code platform implemented for anything other than a major system because there is a barrier to entry, right? You still have to go through all of the security, all of the implementation, all of the licensing. But what's really great about these platforms is that once they're stood up, you can build upon them fairly easily. So you really only need to worry about that application layer. And there's so many simple workflow approval processes in every government agency, right? There's things that are taking place over email, things that are happening on a spreadsheet on a shared drive. And these are all sorts of things that can really benefit from having a centralized platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So let's move on to the next question, which is, how have government agencies adopted this growing trend, as in low code? And what are some unique challenges in the federal space related to no code, low code implementation? And I'm going to go ahead and ask Elisa if she would like to answer this one first.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So some of the ways I think the government had adopted low-code technologies is definitely standing up the platforms. And I think most agencies have a central one. What we are doing a little differently within TTS is we are also piloting a couple others that we're targeting their use for our internal business processes. And what that is enabling us to do is integrating multiple different functional units so that they can all develop with their own creativity. They know their processes the best and develop their own apps. And since they're using the same platform as other groups, they can integrate each of those apps together. I would say some of the challenges that we've come across personally is when the platforms introduce amazing new features, and which is amazing, but then those features sometimes aren't available to us in the government, and they're available to the private sector first, or they may kind of break the authorization that we already have for the platform. And so we might never be able to use some of those new features that are awesome. Another thing that we've come across that's a challenge is sometimes when these platforms integrate too well into our overall enterprise network. Having some segmentation we've seen is actually easier for adoption and for authorization.
Thank you. And then over to Christopher with that same question. How are you guys using low code, or I'm sorry, how have government agencies adopted this growing trend?
Yeah, great, thank you. So what we started out with was a singular contract to have a system integrator come in and build out a few prototype or pilot Salesforce solutions. That was around 4 to 5 years ago. And since then, we've grown from that pilot to having a formal digital transformation system or center that governs the entire Salesforce platform, and then multiple contract vehicles that are delivering all kinds of solutions to the many different customers throughout Veterans Health Administration primarily, and then Veterans Benefits Administration and National Cemetery Administration. Adoption has been pretty smooth. And I would say that a lot of folks are moving towards a Salesforce type solution going forward, because a lot of what we're able to do with the low code, no code is quickly deploy, and that without a lot of like IT funding or IT bottlenecks, because we're just doing it declaratively in Salesforce. So we're able to get a solution, or at least a minimally viable product to the customers in record-breaking time compared to how long it was taking previously under that whole IT path. So it's been exciting, and we continue to grow. We have around 50 apps in the Salesforce platform. One Salesforce instance, we're actually breaking out into a multi Salesforce org strategy. So I think we have around 5 different orgs right now that we're going to build up simultaneously to handle all the different customers. So it looks like it's just going to continue growing from here on out.
Wow, awesome, thank you. And then Claire, jumping over to you, what challenges do you see having had to be endured during the process of implementing low code?
I think the main thing is making sure that, and as part of what we see across the DevOps work groups, is making sure that you've got your CI/CD pipeline that also addresses these low code, no code architectural things and components you can have in place to enable your development, whether it's even a citizen-enabled development environment arena, some of the self-service things that we can see, or your professional developers. And to Hassan's point earlier, as prep for this call, I was looking at some Gartner information. They had a prediction that said 65% of code in 2024 will be low code, no code integrations. Hassan, do you think that's hype, or do you think that's what we're looking across as you look at all the different engineering of components? But how do we make sure that all of us who work in this industry have prepped our environments for that low code, no code teams and what we can do to deliver those services faster?
Claire, to respond to your question, it's not a hype, it's a reality. It is going that direction. If you look at the engineering practices, just to forget the low code for a moment, if you look at what engineers we do, we are not maybe calling it a low code right now, but we are using a lot of reusable components. Like I can give an example from my students, and most of my students, when I say, can we build up a simple web application project? They just go to the GitHub and get some framework. Framework has already built-in component in it, and getting a container version of the platform, and 15 minutes, you have the basic Hello World application up and running. So it's kind of a very mimic version of the low code. So it's a reality. The current engineering forces, current thinking, how can we go fast and build up? We don't want to be stretching from everything from the bottom up, but let's use what is available. So you reuse usabilities or reuse any tools, any libraries. It's becoming a very important, very vital, because there is a necessity on the way. Another thought is also, if it is done already, why I'm going to rebuild again? Let's use that. So statistically, using a GitHub is really increasing a lot, or any open source library is increasing a lot. Containerization getting very famous in the development world and DevOps world as well. So carry out this component into the low code, it's going to become more platform oriented now. We don't need to be everybody's writing a scratch anymore. So let's go to the platform. And now we have the reusable component already there. Maybe some API, maybe some of the services, some of the business cases available. What we have to do, which is the last mile pieces. Last mile is the engineers or the citizen developers or whoever are the business owner. They just go get that happen last mile. So another things also maybe we can tie into the reality. Now we are building a lot of AI-based systems now. Nobody's going to be an AI engineer. It's not required to be an ML engineers eventually, but we would like to be consume the libraries we can use for our database or our data perspective, our reporting perspective. And low-code is a great platform using that type of data analysis for reporting purposes, for implementing some AI techniques in the platform. It's going to be much easier because now we can really set the data based on what we are looking for. Again, another statistic I will share, and based on the AI systems, how it is built, how it is developed, how it's deployed, more than 65% failing because of they're not able to do the last mile, which is last mile is giving the model and then developer build it, but consumer will use that model. So there's a disconnect over there because we are building, but we are not able to deliver it. Why? Because we're not able to address the business needs on time. We're not able to get the user needs on time. So low-code will be a solution for that type of cases as well. So I really see a reality. It's a disruptive, that number is going to go high because we need that. As I said at the beginning, there is no way as an engineering community, we can supply the demand. Demand is huge. In this remote settings right now, everybody's using the digital world right now. How can we achieve that? How can we learn new capabilities? It is difficult. So they really look at that local perspective as the platform.
Thank you for that insight. Any other comments from the panelists before we move on to a poll question?
Yeah, I'm looking at sort of the Q&A questions coming in, and I think the question had to do with, what are some of the concerns, right, that have with low-code platforms, and there was sort of the question about security issues and platform limitations and things like that. And that's very real. That's something to keep an eye on, right? So low code is not a panacea for everything. And most of the cloud-based low code platforms will generally scale very well, but you do need to keep an eye on those platforms' limitation and make sure that you're investing appropriately in the scalability that you need. So for example, at the CFPB, we invested heavily in making sure that our complaint system will be able to withstand increased volume of complaints. And as a result, we've been able to handle the 100% plus increase in monthly complaint volume we've seen over the past 12 months. But even with our current system, we wouldn't have been able to do that had we made different architectural choices. So there are certain places where we know that we implemented something custom because we knew that the standard out-of-box capabilities were not going to scale to the extent that we needed.
Absolutely, thank you.
Kirsten, can I jump in on one of the other questions, because it kind of ties into everything too, is ensuring, there's a question around vendor interoperability. And I think that's the point that I try to take back across the communities where I work with the industry partners, is how do we make sure that we're enabling that interoperability? How do we prove that? And what is that test bed environment? Because we want to ensure, again, that the decisions and choices, the tools that you have are leveraged and be able to quickly adapt to these emerging technologies. Whether we're talking low code today, AI, whatever that environment is, let's focus on the industry communities too for interoperability, so that you know that, particularly as you're moving forward with those investments.
Absolutely, thank you. So with that, I'm gonna ask Alyssa to please throw up our first poll question of the day. That way we can get that answered. And I already know what the question's gonna be, so I'll read it. Oh, there we go, here it is. How familiar are you with what low code is? So please take a moment from our audience and our panelists. You guys can answer it as well. The options being, I know all about low code, I know what low code is, but would like to know more about it. I am aware that low code is important, but I'm unfamiliar with how to start my low code journey. I have no idea what low code is and would like to know about it, or other. So please take a few seconds there and give us your answer. And then Alyssa, whenever you think it is appropriate, you can go ahead and put up the answer to that. So let's see. All right, looks like the highest percentage is, I know what low code is, but would like to know more about it, but not too bad. What do you, the panelists, think about these responses? Does this surprise you, or does this sound pretty much on par with what you expected to get answered?
I can start. So it's not surprising me. It looks like as expected, because as I said, we are using some sort of low code work in our work. We're not maybe realizing that, but maybe using some other macros and Excel file, maybe some of the, some design elements, like some Microsoft tools or any tools that we have some elements in it, but we're not aware of it, or some daily application videos. So I'm kind of expected that result. And probably maybe we can dive into the, what the really difference is, just the, actually I give another example, like what we build up at the, maybe 10, 15 years ago, like what you see, what you will get type of design. So some of engineers will remember that. So it's kind of like graphical way you use some plugins or some visuals creation of the UI, and code will generate it behind the scenes. So it's a similar concept, but the scale is different now. So scale is different, look, because we are addressing more business agility. So it's not surprising for me overall. I was expecting to hear that.
And Elisa, I saw you nodding your head. What are some of your thoughts to that poll question?
Same. I've been using low code for years and had no idea. So I think that's probably a lot of other people's experience as well. Like Hassan said about the macros, and we use a new tool within our org, and like I'm a cheerleader for this tool. That's like how I jumped up and down to come here on this panel, because I'm, advocating for its to get adopted. And I didn't say, I want this low code tool. I just got exposed to it, could create all of these things. Every time someone had talked about this really manual process that they were doing, I was like, so how about this tool? How, like, why is it not in this tool that can do all this automation, workflow, alerting, and brings everybody together? So it really creates a integration and community around, you know, creating everything and reducing all the extra time spent on doing this other stuff. So it doesn't surprise me. I was in their boat as well. And I personally picked that answer because I feel like there's so much more to learn about it as well.
Definitely. Thank you. So I definitely want to make sure that we get into audience questions, and we may have touched on some of these, but let's just make sure that we get them answered. Neelish is asking, what is the evaluation criteria for selecting a low-code platform, given that the platform vendor ranges from large product vendors to small-scale platform vendors? So Christopher, do you think that you could help us answer this question for Neelish?
I could put some basic information out, but I think one of the other panelists might be able to provide some more exact info.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I can go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, we have several SaaS products that we use. Salesforce is not the only one, but because we're looking for a lot of enterprise-wide solutions that are declarative from top to bottom, we typically tend to go towards more of a Salesforce solution for a lot of our enterprise solutions. And for more of those niche things, we use other platforms for like payment services and things like that. So that's about as far as I could take that answer. So I'll turn it over to anyone else.
Sounds like Elisa has some stuff to say about that.
Yep. So I definitely check FedRAMP. The tool that I've been raving about is FedRAMP on the FedRAMP marketplace. And we've also done a couple pilots with some other tools. So I would say, as far as the authorization, having that segmentation and understanding what other interconnections the tool is going to make into the enterprise is going to be a very largely scrutinized portion of the tool set for the security authorization team, because that's where a lot of the power does come from these tools, is those integrations into the enterprise. And also whether or not there is administrative controls to be able to have an administrator be able to turn on and off certain features.
Great, thank you.
Maybe I can build up a couple.
Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, you really need to look at the licensing model that's available, right? Understand sort of your audience, or whether you're using, you know, you're going to have external users, your internal users, what types of features and functionality they're going to need to be able to access. Cannot stress enough the security aspects of it, both FedRAMP, and I think earlier, Elisa even mentioned the fact that some functions are not available to government users, right? And that's something you really need to pay attention to, because, you know, the marketing will, you know, show a really comprehensive solution, but when it comes time to what you can do in government, through no fault of the vendors, right? It's simply what's available to your, you know, what's acceptable to your government agency's security team. You may find that you're dealing with a much more limited set of functionality.
Thank you, David. And Hassan, were you going to add on to that?
Yeah, I would like to add two more evaluation criteria as well. And one is about the end of the day, we will like that citizen developer are going to use the environment. So we would like to make sure that tool is supporting easy build or very intuitive approach. You should not require extra training, because the main purpose of low-code environment, we would like to eliminate and heavy engineering training. We would like to make sure very easy, so anybody use the tools and use their creativity is building an application. So it really depends really depends on like how tool is easy to use. How can we and let the no engineers, like the business analyst, or maybe whoever needs some report, they should go jump to the environment, start to build up without having heavy training, which is kind of training pieces. It's important because I see some tools are great, but it takes time to learn that. Then it is out of the purpose. Another one is I would like to throw that, and let's use the existing capabilities in the tools. And if tool has the ready solutions, it is going to speed up some delivery capabilities. If there is an existing modules in the code, if there is an existing work already done, maybe existing workflow is already done, because the speed is important. If there is something is done already, we can use as a template. Some of the tool has a template. They will say, okay, if you're going to build up this report, here's a template for you. Just going to fill up the content. You have the report layout. So use existing template if there is any tools in it. So more usability perspective. And rest was covered already.
Awesome, thank you.
I'd like to also throw in focusing on automation, because this is how do we all know security risk. How do we ensure that the tools and the processes that we're impacting also have that component that can tie in automation, so that you can check those boxes and ensure that we're not when you go fast, we're not increasing vulnerabilities. So anything that we can do to build in those components are critical. And then again, making sure that everything is interoperable and that you're not walking on each other as you're going through and implementing new procedures.
If I hear clear, you're saying that you should be aligned with the DevOps practices, right? Should be more SDLC practices. We can automate some testing, automate some deployment, right?
That CID/CD
I got it.
Aren't you, Hassan? Yeah. And then
exactly, I follow that.
Making sure it's adaptable. And adaptability to me and agility are the key components of how we increase the delivery of services and do it well.
Right.
David, were you about to say something, or did you just copy it? Okay, never mind. So another question that we had come through that I want to make sure we answer is, do low no-code platforms present challenges to an organization's overall data governance? More specifically, if data-centric business solutions are delivered more rapidly, could authoritative data fragmentation be an unintended consequence? Who would like to take that question?
I mean, I can jump again, but so a couple of things, and I think David a little bit covered up at the back end. So we make sure that the platform and how we are acquiring application, platform should handle the data segregation. If we are talking about the privacy perspective, because some of the data compliances, like GDPR or the HIPAA or other compliance, it should be by design. So tool should have that segregation and the platform level at the design level, because it will be very difficult to put some segregation application content. So platform should have by design at the beginning. And if you have a concern for data separation, let's make sure that platform is supporting that type of compliances. So I believe most of them already compliant with the GDPR or the HIPAA or other requirements, which is the kind of like a platform perspective. Then the tools for the platform should able to give some segregation when we design an application, which is kind of like a role-based access. Maybe we are creating some access list based on our repositories. Maybe we are using a centralized access point. Make sure that the platform is able to talk with our Active Directory. So that's a way to mitigate that. But if the platform is not supporting the role-based access control or different type of access you already have in your organization as a governance pieces, that should be reflected in the tool perspective as well. Maybe like connecting how data elements done and how the access is monitored and how it is stored, how we create a segregation that should be supporting with the centralized access component, so that can solve some segregation, some privacy issues in data perspective.
I think the capabilities of the platform are just as important as how you go about implementing them, because it's, the platform may have the capability to provide all sorts of data security segmentation, and yet, you want to be able to find economies of scale. You want to be able to reuse data sets and be able to you see relationships between different things by having shared data, and it's something that you need to be very deliberate about, because it is also possible that these dependencies can very much limit your growth. So something to be aware of.
Excellent. Thank you for that insight. So before we continue, I would like to pop up another poll question, please, Alyssa, when you get a chance. And this poll question is going to be asking, how far along do you feel the adoption of low-code is in your agency or company? So again, please take a moment to fill that out. The options are: we have fully committed to the adoption of low-code, we have started but not fully adopted to low-code, we are still in the learning process, we have not adopted low-code, or other. So please take a moment to answer that. And then Alyssa, whenever you feel we've got a good amount of responses, you can put the answers up on the screen for us to review. And here they are. So let's see here. 40% says we are still in the learning process and are seeing if this is attainable for us. So I think that that's probably not too much of a surprise. Any feedback from the panelists on these responses? Does it seem hopeful to you?
I think as a group, and this would be a great thing for ATARC, is how can we help with that information component? How can we help provide those resources through some of the discussions that we have through the DevOps working group? Because it falls in alignment with what we're doing, but it's also very specialized in finding those growth mindsets that are ready to adopt it. How can we enable people to go faster? And then that paves the way for the rest of people who might not have gotten that step or toe in the water.
Absolutely. I actually just got an email the other day about someone inquiring if we had a low-code project team. So that will be a really good thing to look into. Any other responses from the group? Hassan, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add for the learning, which is almost 40% of people are still in the learning phase. There are a lot of materials on the internet. There's like virtual conferences. There's actually no code conferences start in 2019. I really advise attend that conferences, or at least follow the materials, and you will get a lot of lesson learned, because this looks like another things in the community work. And if we know how other does, and then get some ideas, then there's some experience. Like, like basic analogies, if you buy any tools from Home Depot, anywhere else, we look at review, right? So reviews is basically you can learn from that conferences or learn from that, the websites or any type of organization, like ATARC is one example. You can look at the reviews, which is one element. Then you will learn that it's going to meet your business needs or not. That's going to address your first questions. Why I need these tools? What is the purpose I'm going to achieve from that tools? Learning should be more about understanding your business needs, understanding your why, and then you will jump onto the tool selection on the how sections. Like to achieve, okay, I learned what is my problem. I have some experience already, which is the tools understanding or the business needs. And then we can look at, okay, maybe X company, maybe Salesforce, maybe other solution will good for my needs. So with that goes back to evaluation criteria we discussed a couple of minutes ago.
Thank you, Hassan. So let's jump into challenges again. I feel like we touched on them, but what are maybe the top challenges that have to be endured when implementing low code? And I'm going to ask Christopher, do you want to kick us off with that question?
Yeah, as much as automation and integration are some of the best parts of any of the low code, no code solutions that we can deploy, it's also one of the biggest headaches, because for, at least in our situation where we are in VBA, that's the point where we do have to bring in several different stakeholders and collaborate with all of them, a lot of times requiring different color of money. I don't know how the other agencies work, if they have IT funding versus non-IT funding, but we typically get into that situation when we are trying to do a lot of integration and automation, which really brings some of the greatest benefits, not having to enter the same data into your low-code solution that you're entering into a legacy solution. But because of the color of money and the timing and the multi-year planning with the IT groups, we usually get kind of stuck sometimes with waiting on that piece to work out until we can execute a lot of that integration or automation pieces. I would say that's probably one of our biggest challenges. All of the rest of the low code solutioning in Salesforce is the quickest part. It's the easiest part. It's that integration piece that whenever we start talking about that, we really got to think well in advance of executing any of that to lay out the good frameworks so we don't run into any issues along the line.
Thank you. Any of our other panelists want to touch on challenges that they see?
Remember that this works across all platforms. This is not just, remember when you're looking, I've done it in my former background and even in my current background, the word can't is not in my vocabulary. So when you're looking at those challenges and you're integrating across platform, find those people that are ready, that are working with you. And then if someone says you can't do it, find the way to work with them to find a solution, because that's where we are in technology. How do we work together? How do we ensure that we have all the components we need to do a successful implementation? And you've got a whole group of us out here that you can work with as well to help kind of blast some of those areas away, particularly by the industry leaders and the government leaders on this call. So it's an exciting time, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'll drop another sort of different sort of challenge, which is once you've got this thing implemented, and I mean, the capabilities of these platforms, I think it's been mentioned before, they're becoming so much more enriched, right? Every year, we're seeing lots of new features and functionalities, even coming to the government. But in general, these platforms are developing functionality for the lowest common denominator. So they don't always provide really specialized tools that you may need to implement your business processes. So basic workflows, basic approval processes, notifications, things like that. But when you get down to it and you're working with your business stakeholders, maybe they expect things to work a little bit differently. So you have the option, right, of going fully customizing on the platform to make it work exactly as your business wants it to work, or you can completely take the out-of-box approach, right, and ask the business to change so that they can use the out-of-box functionality as it's intended, right, and as you're supposed to be seeing the real value from the platform in using. I guess I would just say that the best implementations probably meet in the middle somewhere, and you just need to be very deliberate in considering your maintenance burden when deciding where you want to go custom versus where you want to use sort of those out-of-box components.
Great, thank you. So next we're going to hear, oh, go ahead.
Kristen, I'm going to add one more challenge here as well, which is based on what I have been seeing in a bigger scale applications. If the platform is not tied in the SDLC lifecycle, like we a little bit discussed at the beginning, but let me open up a little bit what that means. It's becoming a challenge for organization. Let's say we're building up a lot of business applications. Now we have hundreds of business applications. If you don't really keep track the history of each of the components and keep into the typical practice, like putting into the repositories. So maybe you're creating some components, some script or some design. Let's get this information stored in a platforms like repository management, maybe case management, maybe whatever the software delivery tools people are using it. Let's record it. Let's note it. Let's build up a lesson learned. Because I saw an example, and people are reinventing their time, or reinventing the things. They're recreating their business flow again. Somebody has done already. Maybe they're not using it actively, but little bit changes. It's going to get much better to use the new version. Let's use the existing one, because if it is not tied directly into the SDLC, it will be very difficult to use the existing components. So not every tool does great. They're giving some capabilities, but let's use the typical SDLC process in the building environment. If not, it's becoming very challenged down the road.
Thank you. So next, we're going to pop up the third and final poll question, and we're going to hear from our audience about what some of their biggest challenges have been when adopting low code. So again, Alyssa, when you get a moment, if you could please put that up there for us. So some of the options include overcoming security, scalability concerns, finding new technology to use for this vendor lock-in, a cultural shift, or other. So please, again, take a moment to answer this poll question. And Alyssa, whenever you're ready, we will go ahead and take a look at the results and see what the majority of folks are experiencing as their biggest challenge. Okay, so looks like overcoming security and scalability concerns is up there. Thank you, Alyssa. So with that, I think another question that we can sort of tie into all this is, how do you overcome these concerns or these challenges, whether it be security, scalability, fear of job loss, vendor lock-in, and whatever else it is that you see as an obstacle. So maybe we can ask Christopher, do you think you could kick us off with that one, please?
Or could you repeat that question?
Sure, just overcoming these challenges, whether the one that you have faced or if you have advice for those who are fearing security and scalability, I believe was the most commonly answered poll question.
Yeah, well, for security and scalability, let's look at the scalability part. I think depending on the solution or platform or SaaS product you're looking at, that's going to tell you all about your scalability and then your business need, right? For us, we have so many common functions throughout the business lines and through all the clients that scalability was really easy. We can take one product or one solution that we've tailor-made and recycle it, re-leverage it for a lot of different use cases. I think one of the answers was fear of job loss. I don't think anywhere throughout our organization anybody has ever thought that they would be losing jobs because of any of the SaaS products. It still requires manual input and users interfacing with it. That's the whole point of these solutions anyway. And then for security, we did have to create basically a security assessment team to ensure that everything that's going into Salesforce data-wise or automation or integration-wise is passing all of the protocols that we have in our VA handbooks. And so we do have that set up. It's pretty robust. It's a formal review process. Every system integrator that's building any kind of solution has to go through that security risk team to get approval. We have quite a bit of documentation and design architectural documents that have to be created, reviewed, and approved by the same Digital Transformation Center, which is our governance and kind of like gatekeepers for the Salesforce platform. So, as long as you're setting up some kind of structure like that protects and ensures the, integrity of your low-code platform, I think you'll be okay.
Thank you. And Elisa, how about you? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I think Christopher covered it really well. I will also say one of the challenges that we've also come across is internally the cost that sometimes comes with creating a new app on these low-no-code tools, is that figuring out that cost reimbursement model, because there is this overhead when it comes to the gatekeeping for the security, and making sure that you kind of get that right from the beginning so that there is not that barrier to entry from a cost perspective as well.
Thank you. And Claire, how about you? Any advice for overcoming concerns such as security or whatever it may be for you?
So by clearly communicating those and outlining a plan of action that says, this is what I'm most worried about. So how can we work across our peer groups and across our industry partners to find that best of breed? And I think that it's, as any technology evolves, it also creates an environment where we can share resources, where we can share those activities. Particularly, I've heard a common Salesforce discussion across here. So how can we capitalize on those best practices for integrating those environments? And then how can we, if you hit a roadblock, what can we do to, again, remove that roadblock? So it's all about ensuring that your tools are interoperable. You've got a documented and proven or even a next best case CI/CD pipeline that you can work within? And then how can you outline a path of people and actions that can help you remove any roadblocks you get? The key point that I'm seeing across everything that I see happening in government, both in the federal space and at the state and local, is how do we increase that automation piece? How do we ensure that we don't leave out a part of our architecture that can increase, kick off a test, kick off a regression test, identify unit coding that has to be completed. And then how can we create those safe zones? So a lot being done in this area, a lot of emphasis on this area. And I know that we can all work together to make it a better world out there.
Absolutely. I see Hassan just came off mute. Hassan, you got something you would like to add to that?
Yeah. I would like to address some cultural issues because there was a concern on the poll as well. On the culture, we have to be using the same agile mindset. We have to use literally a business-oriented mindset. The culture is understanding the tools capable, understanding our needs, and then sharing that amongst other team members. So it's about creating a shareable environment, creating a more transparent environment, and focusing more lesson learned and focusing more on the business outcomes. That's important to build up that culture. Culture is always everywhere. It's DevOps or the low code or anything that we may see that's important. And I would like to add also the Chris's point as the job loss. We are not really taking the people's job away. We are giving it tools so people use that tools effectively and building up the capabilities, and they have innovation time eventually. So in the last DevSecOps survey, we did that. And it was very interesting to see that people are spending more time on learning once they automate the daily work. So it is an opportunity for any citizen developer, whoever the consumers are, they will spend their time for innovating new things. So it's not losing their job. They can get better out of it, which is the plus side of the environment. And third element, I know we did not tackle that, which is vendor locking. So there is maybe people are seeing that we are part of that low code, we cannot go anywhere else. There is a way to export that capability. Just look at the tools, it's giving you an export and a business logic that you can take it out and use somewhere else. There is a capability over there, use that components. I'll stop here.
Excellent. And David, did you get a chance to answer this one yet?
No, but I'll echo, or I'll kind of build on the vendor lock-in, because I think that if you do invest heavily in one of these platforms, it's you can get your logic out, but it's not readily transferable necessarily to another platform. So it's a real thing. It's a real concern. I would say that the best defense against vendor lock-in is try to avoid over-engineering your system. Make sure that you retain some expertise in-house or in agency. Try to maintain quality system documentation. Don't, and not just shelfware, but things that you actually keep up to date as you're continuing to evolve the system. And then finally, just acknowledge and prepare for the fact that you may need to re-platform someday. It's a thing.
Excellent, thank you. So we're pushing up on time, but I do want to get one more question answered for our audience member. Timothy asks, what are your agency's approach to security assessments and how to expedite the delivery of new apps? I guess Ed previously said he got 50% reduction for his agency. So is there anyone on the panel who has any insight into this question? I'll repeat it one more time. What is your agency's approach to security assessments and how to expedite the delivery of new apps?
So I can speak a little bit to both what I experienced at the General Services Administration as well as at the CFPB for Salesforce in particular. And that was to address security authorizations in a tiered approach. Right, so you've got your FedRAMP, which covers majority of your controls at the infrastructure level, and then you've got what's called an org. And if you can create an org level authorization, or at least a series of controls that are common, right, and avoid having to redo that work on a case on an application by application basis, you're going to be better off. So find those controls that are going to be common and see what you can do to avoid having to redo them over and over again.
Excellent, thank you. Any final thoughts for the group before we wrap up?
I'm just going to add what David said for the security approval. So almost every DoD organization, we had to follow up the risk management framework as the guidance for approval. So if we look at really closer to that controls, a local platform is really helping a lot to achieve the approval because we are approving most of the control already in the part of application. It's going to be a ramp up time at the beginning. Once you get that past the ramp up time, and the next is going to be using the same platform because you're not taking extra code into it. So since you are staying the same platform, building up new capabilities, it is moving much faster. What we have to do as the cultural element of the security, we have to share what we are building on the same platform and reuse the approved component, which is approved platform, and it's going to speed up the delivery a lot, tremendously, because we already have the pre-approval at the beginning. The problems I have been seeing it, we keep asking, reevaluate the platform again. No, it's done already. So why we are going reevaluation? Because there's a communication problem as the citizen developer. We're not saying that we are building a little application on the existing platform. We got that approved from existing platform. Let's talk with the assessors or whoever the information security expert are. We have to talk to them what we are building and transparent and share the right things that we are building on the existing platform. That's going to speed up a lot of approval process. Like I saw it, which happened many times and I was a witness of.
Excellent, thank you. So we are actually out of time. This hour went by so fast, but this was so insightful. I really appreciate you all. And we'll be continuing our conversations over in our DevOps working group. So if you're not a participant, please reach out to me so we can get you added and continue to grow our organization. So thank you guys. Again, that is all the time we have. Up next, we are going to be having our only emerging technology talk for today. We have the pleasure of hearing from Bob Jeffcott. Bob is the Principal Systems Engineer over at Software AG Government Solutions. So I am now going to give Bob the floor for his presentation.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Tech Talk on low-code integration and connectivity. My name is Bob Jeffcott. I am a Principal Systems Engineer with Software AG's Government Solutions. Today we will be talking about the importance and key factors of an integration platform in your low-code, no-code landscape. Let's first take a look at how we arrived in this low-code, no-code platform world that we live in today, and more importantly, the impact it had along the way to our user community. In the beginning, applications were built using punch cards. It was laborious and slow and time-consuming. However, one of the benefits, these projects were meticulously designed because they didn't have time to go back and do it again. Then came along our 3GLs, COBOL, Fortran, and the like, and we were able to deliver applications to a wider range of users with wider capabilities. Then came 4GLs, a much more user-friendly language that enabled us to not only build applications quicker, but make changes to those applications so that our users came to expect a bit of customization and flexibility in their applications. But then the first big step in evolution came along. The advent of client-server applications and desktop applications. Now users had the ability to customize their own desktop, their own work environment. Granted, it may have just been something simple like their own color changes, their own window sizes, their own layouts. But again, that expectation of having a user experience that was customized was born. Then the first real big evolution came along, and that was the World Wide Web. Now users had the world at their desktops. They expected every function, every business, everyone to have a web app, and they expected a level of self-serve capabilities. Then the next big evolution came along, mobile applications, the smartphone. And not only did the user community have the world at its fingertips, it could now take that world with them wherever they went. They got really used to whatever need they had to be downloaded at the App Store. That brings us to our low-code, no-code platform world, where we're trying to deliver applications as quickly as possible, as reliably as possible. We're no longer having to do coding. We're no longer having to do extensive testing. But there has been a side effect of this, or I should say an effect on the user community. The user community has come to expect almost immediate results from the IT world. Or as Farouk Assault so eloquently put it, I want the whole world and I want it now. Our response to that demand is the implementation of low-code, no-code applications. However, a challenge with that is there is no single low-code, no-code solution that fits every need on every platform. So what people typically do is they start out with a CRM, customer relations management system. That's usually the first step into that low-code, no-code world. But the reality is you still have your back-end on-prem systems, whether it be a legacy application, ERPs, data warehouses, and a variety of other enterprise applications. Now, because that CRM doesn't meet all the requirements, we start to add things. Start to add a workflow management to do support requests. Then you have to start to integrate to third-party applications, whether it be something like the new trend toward identification, ID management, ID verification, or a simple ordering from a third party. We also start document management, IoT applications now, and a whole host of other cloud services that are out there and available. But now I'm going to have to start to connect these systems together. But they all have APIs, right? So it's no big deal. I can connect my CRM to my ERP, to that workflow management, to that system ticketing, to those third-party applications that support web services. It sounds simple, right? But there are challenges to that. The first thing is that there's really more than a single point-to-point connection. I need to start to connect those systems together across those different applications. And when we talk about those APIs, there really are multiple APIs that need to be invoked on each of those low-code, no-code platforms. It isn't a simple interface to the CRM. There's multiple different objects. There's multiple different capabilities. And you have to learn what all those are, how to orchestrate those. Also, there's often times where more than two applications have to be connected together. It isn't a simple interface between a CRM and a third-party application. I need to start to do an integration between that CRM, maybe an order entry system for a third party, but now I need to feed that information back to my legacy application for my inventory management, feed the financial transactions to my ERP system, and then maybe do a ticket to my workflow management, to my system to deliver information to the customer. So not only do I have to orchestrate all of these different APIs together, but I also have to rely that my business is not going to change. And if 2020 taught us nothing else, it taught us that change is constant, and we have to be prepared to meet those changes and meet those challenges. So there's got to be a better way, right? Let's look at having not only a low-code, no-code landscape, but having a low-code, no-code integration tool to orchestrate all those things together. The idea behind that low-code, no-code integration platform is not only to remove some of those complexities and remove some of those challenges, but to allow you to react quicker and easier and simplify those integration points. Let's take a look at the benefits an integration platform plays in your low-code, no-code world. First, the connectivity. The integration platform can provide a wide range of wizard-driven connections to these platforms, removing a lot of the complexity that you would normally encounter. It goes beyond a simple API interface. It addresses the security requirements. It addresses the various types of connections, such as bulk loaders, event listeners, the standard APIs. It allows you to do simple object integration without having to be an expert in that platform. It handles the typical CRUD, create, read, update, delete. It handles the relationship requirements between the entities within that platform. It handles the field validation rules. It handles any customizations that you might do to that platform. When it comes to data mapping, it understands the entities automatically. It can download those and map those from the language of the platform to the language that you need. Also, what's next? There's always going to be a new capability, a new low-code, no-code platform that you may embrace. And you need to be able to have that integration platform build custom adapters into those solutions. In those APIs we've been talking about, the integration platform handles any of the current APIs, not only to that platform's native API, but can publish out APIs that you may need for other uses. And APIs are constantly changing. We had HTTP, then moved on to SOAP. With the advent of smartphone applications, REST became popular. Now we're seeing a move to OData and GraphQL. By having that low-code, no-code integration platform, I can adapt to those changes and I can handle whatever comes next without having to recode anything. And security. There are a wide range of security requirements, both within the platform and within your own enterprise, whether it be basic authentication, tokens, key stores, OAuth, SAML, OpenID. Now you're starting to see a lot more multi-factor authentication, single-use passwords, and other security requirements. By having that integration platform, that removes those requirements and those challenges from your hand coding, from those applications, and simplifies that. And data mapping. The integration platform seamlessly translate things from the native platform's language into whatever language you need or needs to be delivered to other applications. You don't have to worry about the EBCDIC to ASCII translation when you're dealing with mainframes. You can seamlessly move from XML to JSON and map back. You can parse out strings. You can map data from one format to another. Having an integration platform to go along with your low-code, no-code landscape brings a host of other benefits as well. Let's just look at a couple of them. You can start to enforce SLAs, whether it be communication between these platforms or whether it be events that happen within each individual platform. The integration platform gives you a single place for auditing. You can start to leverage throttling capabilities to ensure that you're not hitting one environment too often or there aren't runaway events that are happening. You can have versioning. There's always changes to these different low-code, no-code platforms with their APIs, so you can address those. You don't have to immediately respond to the latest and greatest. You can do policy enforcement. Who gets to see what? Just because you can have access to a system doesn't necessarily mean everyone is treated equally. So you can do policy enforcement between those applications without having to code any of that. And as we know, the best line of code is one that isn't written. You don't have to do testing. You don't have to do changes to it if it's not written, if it's that no-code version. Now let's revisit our demanding user community and see how a low-code, no-code integration platform can help meet their needs. Some of the key benefits include that wizard-driven application connectivity and service creation, giving you the ability to connect to almost any platform without having to be an expert in that platform. Easy mapping, orchestration, and publication can quickly meet changing business or citizen demands and needs, delivering information where it's needed in a timely manner. By having a wide range of reusable services, it can limit the development time, deliver more reliable results in a shorter period of time. By having the ability to have global security and policy enforcement ensures safe, secure communication of information across your enterprise. Thank you so much for attending today's Tech Talk on low-code, no-code integration.
All right, thank you, Bob, for that presentation. Up next, we will begin our last panel of the day, which I also have the pleasure of moderating. So to start us off, I would like to introduce our panelists. So if our panelists for this second panel could please come on camera and turn their audio on. I would like to first introduce Omar Boachi. He is the Director of Emerging Technologies and Innovation over at Ginnie Mae. And we also have on this panel Florence Iglesias. She is the Senior IT Specialist for FTA over at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Our next panelist is Phil Lataut, who is the Executive Director of the Solutions Development over at the Office of Chief Information at DHS. And also, we have Chris Borneman, who is the Vice President and CTO of Software AG Government Solutions. So again, if our panelists could please come on camera so we can see everyone, that would be great. Thank you so much. So before we begin, I just want to encourage all of our attendees to please submit your questions to the Q&A section of this platform, and we will go through them throughout this panel discussion. So please send them as you go. First, to start us off, I would like us to go around and have each panelist tell us a little bit more about themselves and their work and what it is that they're up to. So, Omar, could you please kick us off?
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a privilege and honor to be here with my colleagues. My name is Omar Boaishi. I work for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The program office is called Ginnie Mae. I have been working with technology since the 80s. I did a couple of, applications from the introduction of PCs to the client server, to the introduction of the internet, and then ERP. So it's a great honor to really share my views. And again, this is only my views, do not reflect my agency's views. And currently what I do for Ginnie Mae is I lead their emerging technologies and innovation. And I'm very pleased to share with you what we do and the experience we have and how low code, no code is an integral part of the offering and the proposal we are presenting to our leadership and to Ginnie Mae in terms of modernizing and transforming our solution, whether they are legacy solution or legacy that needs to be revamped and addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. And let's jump to Florence, please.
Hello, my name is Florence Iglesias, and I'm with the Federal Transit Administration. It's a mode within Department of Transportation. I'm the federal lead for Business Intelligence, RPA, and FTA's National Transit Database, which is also called NTD. NTD was established to be the central repository for financial, operational, and asset conditions of American transit systems. It's a major capital investment in the FTA portfolio and was the first new application released to production, leveraging Appian, FTA's low-code solution. The data in NTD is used to apportion transit funding to urbanized and rural areas.
Thank you, Florence. And let's jump to Phil next.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have been at Homeland Security for about 8 years, and before that I was at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where I was the Director of Architecture and Director of Systems Development. And before that I had about 13 years in the software integration community doing as a contractor for a number of federal agencies. And so I've seen a lot of different tools and techniques, and through the evolution, someone like Omar, who's seen things more than once as they come around. And we're using a number of low-code technologies to be able to meet the demanding need of our users for more sophisticated workflow systems, integrating different business processes across the organization, and to promote information sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Chris.
Okay, I appreciate the direction. So our role is a little different than many of our panelists. I'm coming here from industry. I've served as a CTO and CIO for many years. The last several have been very focused on public sector. And one thing I've really come to appreciate is that the public sector IT landscapes, they've been shaped over decades by constituent requirements, program priorities, and funding challenges. The result has been this collection of really fragmented systems that often complicate focus on agency success. It brings great argument for modernization. At the same time, it kind of brings its own set of challenges. So as agencies move to low-code, no-code environments, some common themes have emerged that I've been involved on, where we're trying to help address some of those challenges that they've encountered. The first has really been around taking a no-code integration approach to how we connect to your existing systems and data silos, so that those new application frameworks can coexist and even extend your existing capabilities. Key for us has been doing that independently of the low-code framework, so it can be reused. It's been quite common. It was mentioned actually in our intros here. The large agencies, sometimes have more than one low-code platform, two or more. And so whether you're using ServiceNow, Salesforce, Appian's reference, Mendex, et cetera, it's important how we access those existing systems consistently and independently. And the other area has just been the agencies realize certain aspects of their business logic and rules they belong in kind of a common system, so that the low-code systems can then invoke those. And we've taken, again, a no-code approach to how we can provide that API framework, so that we can take out probably about 50% of the effort that's used to go through and develop and sustain those APIs. And so I'm happy to discuss examples today of real-world government customers that are doing this. And again, thanks for having me on the panel.
Yeah, of course. And you kind of got right into it with one of the first questions that I was going to ask as well, is jumping into challenges. That's a theme throughout that a lot of people, want to better understand. So maybe, Florence, could you kick us off with that? What challenges have you seen to be endured during the implementation of low-code, or what can people expect to have to deal with?
So for our agency, we established our low-code platform probably 5 years ago, right? So in the beginning, it was always, like in the beginning, all these applications, we started off with 1 and now we have 8, but they all started off with their own user management, their own security, right? So we had to figure out how to bring all these applications into one platform, and we had to set some standards. We looked at we looked at user management, making sure everyone's user management follows the same processes, and then we also created some requirements. Like if you have organizational information, you get that information from SAM, right? So that organizational data stays consistent. So we just did a lot of gatekeepers, some checklists to make sure when we start low code, everyone's on the same page. Another issue we had was, getting requirements. People don't understand low code, and that you can build in an agile manner. So in the beginning, our customers didn't understand that they don't have to give us all their requirements all at once. We can build incrementally. So it was that type of education that was an uphill battle in the beginning, but I feel like we are at a good place now.
Thank you. And then Omar, how about you? Any challenges that you would like to address for the audience?
I believe for us, in terms of challenges, there are few. I mean, with the support of the leadership, our leadership at Ginnie Mae are keen in modernizing and saving taxpayers' money and looking for solutions that will replace and mitigate the risk that we have with legacy application. So the drive from the leadership is there. So there is no need for me or for my team to sell any ideas to them. Now, with low code being part of low code and no code being part of the solution, it's been embraced and it's been assessed. The challenge is for us to make the right selection, to make the right mentoring to Ginnie Mae, and also proper governance, and to make sure that we assess the technical debt that will be required to undertake. So for us, when you introduce something new, there is an impact to the landscape, to what we have. So a proper assessment, due diligence is required. Also, security. Security is very important for us. We deal with mortgage finance. We deal with information of our citizens that acquired housing and banking information, financial information. So for us, security is important, and there is no way we will implement a low code, no code, just because it's low code, no code. We need to make sure that security is addressed properly and demonstrated in this tool. Before we admit it. That's why we started really with my team at the innovation lab to make the assessment, to do the POCs, to look at the functionality, to look at all the aspects, because low code does not come single-handed like the ERP in the past. You have one application engine, you have one screen design, and you have one access to database. RPA are more complex. I mean, low code and no code are more complex. You have the RPA, you have the machine learning, you have the user interface, you have access to databases, you have vendors that have data in their cloud offering in terms of the FedRAMP requirement that we have. So for us, the selection is really the challenge. The recommendation to our leadership is the challenge. Costing this is a challenge, but my team is embarked on doing a lot of POCs and looking at solution, learning from our colleagues at other agencies. And we reach out to colleagues at GSA, for example, to NASA. Even we go to the private sector, like to the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, because they are similar in terms of the business we conduct, to see the lesson learned, and they have been willing to share with us. We want to know success, and we want to know also failure, so we can make the proper judgment and ensure that when we commit taxpayers' money into this investments is a wise decision, is a decision that can definitely be considered and vetted and supported by our leadership. So the challenge for us is just making sure that it fits properly, it saves taxpayers' money. There is a reason why we're doing it. So for us, and this is our journey, and it has been supported by the leadership at Ginnie Mae.
Excellent, thank you. And Phil, did you have anything that you would like to add to that question about overcoming challenges?
Sure, and I've heard a lot of discussion about security, and that can of course never can be minimized. But one of the advantages of these enterprise solutions is that the installation and configuration often requires or leverages existing security infrastructures, and once they're established, the environment is itself secure. And so, for instance, here at DHS, we have the ability to support over 200,000 users using the enterprise controls we have in place when these low-code environments are plugged into it. So nobody has to log in, nobody has to remember a password or worry about security, because it's being enforced by the application environment. The PIV card provides a single sign-on solution for these environments, which is a great advantage and certainly accelerates the delivery of solutions. The challenge, though, is more about the over promise of what these low-code environments can deliver. the real work of doing requirements or business process engineering cannot be minimized. And in many cases, when those things are skipped over, we often end up with a solution that doesn't scale properly, and not in terms of the computing or storage, but in terms of meeting the wide range of business opportunities or processes that have to be implemented. And so I think that the low-code environment offers significant advantages to making some of the promises of agile development real, but it's not a panacea. It still requires some of the old school kind of, here are the requirements, here's the data model, here's who has to get access to what information, and how those that hard work of analysis still needs to be accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a poll question that we're going to throw up here in a second, and it is, oh, there it is, never mind. So it is relating to data silos, and then we'll ask a question related to this poll. But if the audience and panelists could go ahead and take a moment to answer, in your opinion, what is the best way for agencies to eliminate data silos? The options include moving applications to the low code, use integration software, choose an all-in-one solution, or others. So please take a moment to do that. And then Alyssa will throw the answers up whenever she thinks that it is ready to go. Okay, so looks like use integration software has the highest results. So the question that I want to ask, and maybe we can start off with Chris, is how can agencies eliminate data silos? And also, you can relate it back to that poll too, if it surprised you or if it was kind of on par with what you were expecting.
Sure. Yeah, I thought the poll was, for me, on target, right? Because that really is our approach. And when agencies start looking at low code, a lot of times that they're looking at it as the panacea, right? It'd be great for us to go through and get this new application and going, but then you're creating its own data repository, its own silo in and of itself, just right there inside that low code tool set. And what people typically forget is that low code, a lot of times we're buying SaaS, we're buying inside the FedRAMP environment, is how do I connect into those back-end systems? And they're not going away at all, right? Mainframes have been around for many years. It may surprise everyone. 90% of all credit card transactions today are still processed on the mainframe. It's 30 billion transactions a day, or business transactions, are processed in the mainframe. So it's still there. And so how do I get back to my on-premise systems or even back into my mainframe and do that? And so we find that the strongest compelling is embrace what you have. It's very costly, just throw it out and start all over. So, embrace what you've got through integration, and you can really move your data back and forth. There's caught the tail end of the prior segment. It talked about, how it can connect multiple platforms together onto one messaging bus or one event. And so I can let everyone know and keep everything in sync. And that's really been the easiest way of how we do it. To do that integration. And then, the second piece is that API, just, how do I expose it so I get to it consistently?
Thank you. Florence, how about you? Do you have any ideas about eliminating data silos as it relates to the poll question?
So when I looked at the poll question, not surprised, but we got around to eliminating data silos at FTA by using low code. We put everything in our low code platform. So we have access. So we have 8 applications there, and we all have access to everyone's data, given security and security requirements. So data stored in one place. With that, we're able to create a single holistic view of the transit agency. And we even have some governance behind that. So, we do have gatekeeper reviews. And this is an independent person that will look at the data model and make sure that they're using common services and that there's common definitions for things that can be used differently.
Thank you. And Phil or Omar, do either of you want to answer that question as well?
Go ahead, Phil. I'll follow.
All right, well, thank you. I'm going to say that there is no way to end data silos, but in fact, what you need to do is embrace the fact that they're going to exist and develop strategies around incorporating them, understanding how they evolved, understand why they exist. Everybody has their own business needs and has some aspects of what makes their data model unique and they can justify its creation. And what we have to do within the enterprise is acknowledge that those are there, figure out what data we really need. And because that really accelerates the deployment of new applications if people have the flexibility to tailor their data models to their specific applications. Obviously, there has to be some control, some data architecture, some overall, I'm trying to avoid the word governance, but there has to be some review of what's going on. But by the same token, you can't stop it from happening. So I'm going to repeat myself and say you have to embrace their creation and figure out how to where the nexus of how that data needs to interact with each other to provide that enterprise picture when appropriate and when required.
I agree with Phil, and for me, with the data silos, there is ways to resolve it. We are looking at doing it through the culture change, by educating the users, by educating our colleagues that on the impact of data silos. And we are also hoping, like Florence, that we will look at low code as a tool, maybe combined with integration tool, to resolve data silos and allow our colleagues to access data in a meaningful way. So for me, again, agree with Phil, it depends. I mean, it's a culture change. It's something that is the result of the progress of technology. Also, there is a need sometimes to create data silos because of subject areas specification that requires you to create that, and then integration comes, and then your data needs to be made available. There is data ownership. There is, there is a lot of things that impact and create these data silos, and it needs to be addressed as a culture change and not just looking at application. Although application will help, and I am hopeful. Maybe I will definitely reach out to Florence and see the experience they have with the low code and impact in the data silos. But it's a pain that agencies have and needs to be addressed to save money. I mean, we cannot afford to continue with the management and the impact data silos create on our agencies.
Now, speaking of culture, what strategies can be put in place to ensure that continuous business transformation becomes the cultural norm and then leads to increased customer engagement? How about we hear from Chris first on this one?
Sure. Well, I think part of it is get everyone on the same page. We spent a lot of time on the transformation inside the transformation offices, both in terms of what are the processes, regardless of what the tooling is underlying behind it, but what are the processes that we actually want to go through and do. And the second is inventorying what are all our capabilities as an organization and the underlying systems that provide that. And that gives us a really good roadmap so we can prioritize what's the best opportunity for us to move that in, this particular piece into a low code and focus on that success first and then build upon it. Rather than, we work with a lot of agencies that you said, hey, I want to go off the mainframe, and they wanted to do a massive shift. And so years later, millions of dollars spent, that's a really hard path to go versus figuring out what are the key things that are on the mainframe that I want to move off. And so if you start at the higher level, what are the processes I need? What are my capabilities at systems? And that can give us a great organizational roadmap for how we can be on the same page and moving forward towards a low code deployment.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to answer that one? I'll just repeat it. What strategies can we put in place to ensure that continuous business transformation becomes the cultural norm? Looks like Omar wants to.
Go ahead, Omar.
I will take a little stab at it. I mean, for us, a culture change in the government happens two ways. One is through regulations and policies and directives. But for me, with that, really, you don't foster the enthusiasm that is needed to adapt, that change and be behind it. So for us, we are taking a different stab at bringing innovation as a mechanism to foster an innovation culture. I mean, for folks to embrace change. And that requires hard work. I mean, you need to sell it to them, you need to mentor them, you need to showcase the benefits of embracing change. I mean, change is required, but sometimes you need folks to rally behind change, support the impact of the change, and also for leadership to help you with the funding required to effect that change. So for me, innovation lab, innovation work I'm doing is helping. Also, the leadership of Ginnie Mae is also supporting the change management that we need to affect at Ginnie Mae. And our vendors are very, folks like AG and others, Appian, ServiceNow, you name it. They come and share with us, things that we should consider to effect change. So there is a few things that we do here and there, and we are hoping that it will result on the right impact for us. Back to you, Phil.
I'm going to, you were kind enough to repeat some of the things I said. I'm going to paraphrase some of the things you offered, and I'm going to describe it as velocity. If you can deliver functionality and capability quickly, that allows people to experiment with change, organizational change, be able to look at business processes in a different way, and return data that they can really use to improve or affect change. If you have metrics that really force or drive organizational change, you can actually be more help that change happen. And one of the things that low-code tools allow you to do is deliver solutions with a high rate of velocity. And that becomes a forcing function to help organizations understand the value of looking at data differently or changing a business transaction and not spending months or years doing some old school waterfall development. But instead, you have a solution that you can stand up in a few weeks, and you can demonstrate to folks the value of embracing that new environment.
Thank you. And Florence, did you have anything you wanted to add when it comes to cultural norm, a shift?
No, I mean, I think Omar and Phil said the same thing. It's just doing things incrementally, having a roadmap that you use to communicate with your fellow government customers. We also, we often have too much work rather than like at FTA, everyone wants the new technology. They want to see new things. They attend a lot of conferences and then they bring things up. So our challenge is trying to get everything done and try to figure out what works for FTA, what doesn't. So we actually implemented an enterprise architecture working group at FTA where we look at things, consider things before, try to figure out, does it make sense to go into low code before we actually proceed?
Very cool. So before we get to our next poll question, we also have a question on regulatory compliance. So I want to ask, what from you guys' perspectives do you see agencies need in order to achieve regulatory compliance? And I'm not sure who would like to tackle this one first, but if any of you have had experience with that, please, this would be a good time to share that with us.
We have one experience in terms of the housing reform that we need to assess, and also there is a few regulation that comes from the government to us in terms of the mortgage finance that we need to consider. Now, those regulation and directives and changes requested by the government sometimes require system changes. And for me, I see that low code will be the tool really to be very nimble and agile and fast in terms of changing the application to reflect that regulation requirements. With legacy application, the experience has been that when a regulation came, it took too long, it was costly, it requires a lot of testing, it's hard to change, hard to train users on the new changes. With low code, I think it's just because of the agility of that tool and the way things get changed. I see a benefit to us addressing regulations. So that for me, definitely, that's one of the components we are sharing with our leadership as things to consider for their investments. So definitely, and regulations do come to all of us in the government agencies one way or another. So to have a flexible platform is a must and needed for us.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to tackle that one before we
Yeah, I would just add a little bit in, given a customer example. So one of our customers is IRS, right? So highly monitored, highly regulated, major source of income for the United States is coming through the IRS. So a lot of eyes off of that. And some of the advantages to having that common platform, whether it be at the low-code application level, whether it be at low-code integration level, is that if you've got a framework or a platform that meets those regulatory compliances, extending the capabilities when new legislation comes out or new requirements comes in, makes it a lot easier to still maintain that compliance versus going out and getting a whole new system for some new requirement and then making sure it fits all your regulatory. And so for IRS with pandemic has had to be very nimble, right? When we think about the IRS, it's not just the revenue coming in, but they're a major service provider now, right? All your other agencies, many of them circle back to the IRS as the source of truth for data on taxpayer citizens, to do verification, in particular eligibility. So healthcare, eligibility for your credits on healthcare were really driven off of what the IRS actually had as the data, even though it wasn't a healthcare provider. And then we look at the pandemic and what we go through with our stimulus funding and our stimulus checks. Now, again, I've got new regulations that come out, but I go back to IRS as a data service provider to determine eligibility. And in their case, actually like the actual stimulus check generation coming through them. And it's great that they had a platform, many of them, to help them still be adherence against those regulatory and be nimble enough to react very quickly to changing regulations.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Alyssa if she could please put up our next poll question. And that is going to be the first one, Alyssa, when you get a chance. How has your agency reevaluated its technology to ensure a strengthened customer experience? Please take a moment to answer that. The options include adopted low code, found new emerging technology, focused on collaboration tools, or I am unsure, or other. So let's just give that a few seconds and please take a moment to answer. And Alyssa, whenever you feel it is time, we will go ahead and take a look at those answers. Okay, here they are. So mostly focused on collaboration tools, and adopted low code is right behind that. Any initial thoughts from our panelists on these results? Are they surprising or kind of what you expected, or just totally wild? Phil, you look like you want to say what you're thinking, but you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of ways to kind of solve the problem of customer experience, but it really is, a lot of people are focused more on how do they get their work done faster, quicker. And I think, at least at Homeland Security, collaboration tools have been critical for us to work across the agency or the headquarters and the components. And certainly the supporting technology, the things like our Salesforce and ServiceNow applications provide, but it's really more about how do we kind of make sure that we share the work, we're aware of the work, and provide awareness of what tasks have to be worked. And it's really about not the technology so much as what people are using to accomplish the technology, using the technology. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and going off of that too, our next question sort of relates is, how has your agency reevaluated its technology needs during this pandemic and further strengthened customer experience? So any insight onto that question would be great. Florence, do you have any thoughts around customer experience, particularly during this time of remote work and pandemic and all that?
Sure. When the pandemic started, you know, a lot of people at FTA, a lot of the workers, we did not have a telework agreement. We were expected to come in the office almost every day. There was a few, like we could stay home once in a while. Like right when the pandemic hit, luckily we were bringing in teams. So we did have those collaboration tools. And we were able to, even before the pandemic happened, when we knew it was starting to wreak havoc, we started, the IT team started training people on how to use Teams and how to use different collaboration tools so that we were prepared, so that when we were forced to stay at home, we had the tools available. On the transit agency front, it was there was a big change. You know, transit ridership was down 63% nationally. And then a lot of agencies were reporting that they had to furlough or, you know, furlough in the next coming months. So when they brought up that when Congress passed the $25 billion in CARES Act, you know, we had to quickly make sure that funding was available. Luckily, our tool, we have our platform, we use Appian for our grants management as well. We were able to get that in quickly without having to do that many changes. Like it was low code, so we were able to put in some features within a sprint, all right, and get that out. So in terms of customer experience, we wanted to be able to make sure, like everyone around the regions knew what was occurring also. So we also built some dashboards that was available for everyone to see so they could see where we were. You know, and then we had dashboards for our executives and our leadership, and we had some for each region so they could see how their transit agencies were doing and what was still available.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And Chris, how about you when it comes to customer experience?
Yeah, so I'll give one that's both relevant for me as someone who lives in Virginia, as well as one of our customers. And so we work very closely with the Virginia DMV. And what ended up being interesting as the pandemic hit, you know, all the DMV offices closed, right? So if you had to go in for anything, you couldn't do it at all. You had to go online. And only recently have they started doing in-person appointments, and it's booked months in advance to try and get in. It's the fastest experience when you get there. I did get in, but it's a long lead time to get into there. And what was interesting is, you know, they developed this solution before low code. It really came into it, but servicing it from the end customer, the constituents, they hit their website and they're able to go back and hit their mainframe and do that integration. Right, so they took a low code on the integration side of things. And so most of the services that you could go in to the DMV were already available online. And so they had this big shift that most people probably weren't even aware that they could do online, that they now went to because they had to. And then of course, now they're going in person for just a few in-person things. And so it's interesting as you shift into more of these modern accessible platforms, and Florence's example of the grants is a great one, of setting something up really quickly and making it easily accessible, hopefully not having to come in through a company, the corporate VPN, make it very, very easy to access. And that provided that nimbleness for it. So whether it be at the app level or at the integration, if you have that, you can really react to changing situations.
Thank you. And Omar, over to you. I'm going to ask you the same thing. How has your agency reevaluated its technology needs during the pandemic and strengthened customer experience?
You know, for us, nothing really has changed because we've been doing that since I can remember. When I joined the agency in 2012, we've been looking at our application. We're doing tech refresh, we're doing modernization, assessment. So it never stopped, to be honest with you. The only thing that we have done different is, and just one point to address on Florence input in terms of telework, we all had telework agreements. And it was generous. So we had like at a minimum 2 days teleworking. So people have experienced teleworking and producing from home. So there was nothing, that's pre-COVID, and we've been doing it for many years. So that's one thing. The other one is through the vision of my boss, the CIO of Jenny May. She has requested I lead this collaboration assessment for Ginny Mae, which I got my team to do. And we've been looking at tools, and we have collaborated with other program offices within HUD to adapt the tool. It was MS team, and we conducted a very rigorous and fast training for all our colleagues. So we have trained them before COVID, not knowing COVID is going to start. We have trained them on collaboration, using MS team and changing documents and getting approval, all that. We have done it just because we believe in telework, we believe in collaboration, we have done that. Now, when COVID came, the agency was ready. I mean, nothing really has changed except the announcement from our leadership to stay home and work from home. Everybody was ready to work from home and collaborate and set up meetings and exchange documentation. Only few folks needed to report to the office. But now collaboration for us at the time of COVID, 100%. We're using MS Team, we're using Zoom. And we are attending to our customer. Now, for the customer focus that we are doing at Ginny Mae is creating a division that has the customer experience as a main focus. So they embrace tool to train the customer, they embrace tool to interface with the customer. They are using application, local application, to make sure that there is interaction, also communication with our partners and vendors and banks that we deal with. So this all has been put in place before COVID. So I am really happy to report that we were not impacted, except maybe with leadership providing the guidelines and the regulations and the input to save our home owners, especially folks on the affordable housing, and allow them that assistance needed to save their home. That's the work that our leadership has conducted. But in terms of the infrastructure to conduct work, it was really put in place, and the experience of the folks to work from their home was already there. So we're grateful for that, and that's through the vision of our leadership. That had we not had telework experience, that will be something that we need to train folks on, and that would be impactful. But for us, because of the generous telework agreement we had, we did not see any impact.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for answering that. I'm going to take a moment to plug that we do have a customer experience focused project team at ATARC led by Amber Chaudhry over at SBA. So I really encourage anyone, panelists or attendees to reach out to me so that we can get you looped in on some of the work that's being done in that space. So that leads me to my next question. And let's, Phil, if you want to kick us off answering this one first. What type of solutions have been made available at your agency to help determine what gets prioritized in specific challenge areas? And whatever those challenge areas look like to you, but some examples could include aging infrastructure, cybersecurity, data analytics capacity, or whatever, issues that you guys have found you've been running into.
So, boy, that's a loaded question for us. When you say tools, I'm going to say that in many respects, we're still pretty old school in terms of how we prioritize our objectives. There is probably a lot of work, especially now since the pandemic has set in, is that very few of us have been in the office more than a handful of times this past year. And so we've had to rely upon things like Teams and Jira, the SharePoint to develop and exchange planning documents, but we're still pretty much set up in our old ways of the standard big program planning activities of here's the budget, here's the expenses, here's it out for 5 years. And it's more relying upon the conversations between the leadership team about what we want to do is more important versus something else. There's also, since the change of administration, every priority that we might have had has been basically turned on its head. So we have a whole new set of things that we're the new administration is focusing on, which has kind of taken away from maybe some of the things that we wanted to do. We're focusing on the border. We're focusing on the pandemic. We're looking at how to reunite families. And so there's, I mean, it really, there's a department-wide set of priorities that are focused on delivering mission needs, and so some of the infrastructure stuff has kind of fallen to the wayside. There's also the whole solar winds aspect, which has really kind of undermined some of our plans in terms of how we're dealing with that. So, you know, but fortunately, we've been very maybe not fortunately, we haven't been lucky, but I mean, we have been, we were well prepared for handling the influx of telework. And in many cases, people haven't even noticed, except that they don't have to get on Metro or drive in anymore. So I didn't really answer your question, but I did the best I could.
No, thank you. That was great. And Florence, how about you? What types of solutions have been made available at your agency to help determine prioritization as it relates to specific challenge areas?
Sure. We actually built a customer service portal in Jira, to capture user requests. We have SLAs behind it, so we have a certain amount of time to respond back, to get their requirements, and then look at impact. Does it affect a large number of people? How stable is the process? So we look at different things, and then we take the request that we get from the customer service profile, and if it's technology related, we meet with our enterprise architecture working group to discuss, do we have the money for it? Are we able to start this now? Can we put it in our existing platform? But really the biggest new change for us was that customer service profile portal. So you can put in a question also, and it'll try to give you an answer. So we call it our FTA Google. If that doesn't work, then we will consider some new technology or adding to an existing module.
Excellent, thank you. Chris, would you like to answer this one as well?
Sure. So on our side, it's more what we've provided. So in the middle of the pandemic, about July last year, we launched a FedRAMP authorized service. It's moderate authorized around that EA IT portfolio management, as well as capturing your business process side, right, and the systems that support those underlying processes. And so what we find with our customers, especially in the civilian public sector, is two big areas. Is a focus on FIAF for the federal EA framework, as they look at what do they actually have for their capabilities and the systems and the security, et cetera. And then marrying that back with TBM or technology business management to look at it from the spend aspect. And then marrying those two together and then capturing all those demand signals, and then based off of the right investment mix, what bubbles up to the top based off of whether it be security risks, regulatory compliance requirements that say no matter whether it makes sense to do or not, you need to go implement this thing by this time frame or by this date, et cetera. And that's been really good for agencies to understand what the footprint is, and they have the right conversation with all interested parties as to what that roadmap really looks like. So that was really kind of our big focus last year, kind of in the midst of everything going on.
Thank you. And Omar, wrap us up with that one, please.
In terms of what we do at GNMA, everything starts with a strategy plan. So for us, we develop our strategy plan, we get the approval. Every program office, every division puts forward the strategy plan. With that comes certain tools requirement or solution requirement that would need to be considered. We have a program, we have a division in the Office of the President that convene this change management meeting, if you will, and they consider the solution being proposed, and all the leadership at GNMA give their opinion and vet and give approval before something gets proceeded. So, but for us, it really starts with the strategy plan. That, like for me, for example, for the innovation lab and emerging technology, I developed my strategy plan for the year. I presented, I get asked questions, and I need to clarify them for them. And then with that comes certain requirement that I need to propose, and with the right funding requirement or requests, with the right tools and technology to be considered. But we have also added something new, which is the ideation, because the business will put a request that technology team needs to consider. But there is, we have expanded that to even consider ideas that our colleague has that needs to go through a process of consideration. And if it's something that needs to be developed, that's something that either gets embraced by the technology team if it's in the technology field, or by policies or by any other group that it touches. And again, once it gets considered, it goes through that process of vetting and approval that really ends at our leadership staff that sits in a weekly meeting and look at the impact of the solution and give the go, no-go decision, and also recommendation for change, or they just give us the approval to proceed with the contractual process, which also involve procurement and go through that process that we all know in the procurement track. So for us, that's basically the process we do at Ginnie Mae.
Excellent, thank you. So much valuable information. All right, so we're gonna throw up our last poll question of the day. So Alyssa, when you get a chance, if you could please put that up on the screen. How likely are you to implement low code in your agency? So the answers range from very likely, likely, to I do not know, to unlikely, to not likely at all. So please take a moment and answer that poll question.
Kirsten, where's the option that's already there?
We should have added that one in. I didn't even think about it. We'll keep that in mind. Maybe that's why not everyone's answering. Alyssa, and then you can go ahead and put up the answers. Thank you. Okay, so very likely. So maybe they're also saying that it's already there. Well, that's good. So we are coming up close on time, unless there's any other audience questions that come through. But I think to sort of wrap up this session, it would be really good if we could just go around and everyone, please leave the audience with a piece of tangible advice they can take as they embark upon their low-code journey, or maybe they're already on their journey, and just anything that you can provide to the audience that would really benefit them within their agency or organization as it relates to low code, I think would be a really good way to kind of wrap up this event. So how about we start with Phil, and then we'll just go around this way on my screen.
So just because it's low code doesn't mean you don't have to learn how to use it. It still requires training and an appreciation of the implementation paradigm, and that you need to know why to use it, when to use it, and how to test whether or not it works. So one thing that I'll argue about, with Chris, he said earlier in his presentation, is there is no testing. Well, if there's no testing, then there's no functionality, because there's always a bug someplace. Tease them a little bit, but you still have to invest the time to learn how to use the tool and learn how to use it in a constructive and productive way.
Thank you. And Florence?
So I guess my advice is not everything belongs in low code. And if you put something in low code and you do a lot of integrations, then it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to complete it within 9 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it's advertised. Integration makes everything a little bit more difficult, especially if you're integrating with systems outside of your agency.
Thank you. And Chris?
Sure. I mean, and I agree, Phil, on the testing aspect. But my comments would be around the integration, focusing on that low code. And I'll just speak to my own experience. I was a customer of the company that I now am at, for 10 years. And as part of that, we used no code integration to manage the entire aerospace supply chain that ran through. Yeah, 10 billion worth of spend every single year running through, and then it grew and grew and grew to about 100 billion of spend running through that system. And over the course of 10 years while I was there, we upgraded the integration platform no less than 4 times. And every single time, because we took a no-code approach, while we did lots of validation every single time, it just worked. We didn't have to recode, change things around over and over and over again every time technology platforms change. And they definitely go through and change over the years, different ways of doing things. We were very SOAP oriented. Now things have gone towards REST and different document sets have gone through, but the platform was there rock solid all the way through that. So if you do take that low code approach to integration, you'll get a lot of benefits, especially in government systems that tend to last for really long times, to have some that will grow and upgrade with you throughout that whole time frame.
Excellent. And Omar.
Yes, for us at GNMA, we are definitely embracing hyper-automation principles. I mean, this is something big on our list. Or as my CIO is coining it as automation on steroid. So for us, definitely low code, no code exists within the GNMA. We have it. We are also looking at other solutions like Appian, ServiceNow, Mendix. We're looking at all of them. But I want everybody to think of low code and no code not as just a solution or a piece of code out there that does, it's magic. This is a platform. It's a philosophy. It's a big change. And for us, we definitely are considering low code, no code platform with intelligence on top of it. Don't bring me a white page and say start from scratch. We need intelligence. We need proof of development that was done elsewhere so we can see the benefit of that tool. It's a journey that I believe most of the agencies are undertaking. It's the tools that will be best fitted for the government will be, because for us, we look at the experience of Homeland. We look at the experience of, agencies out there, and we embrace their success. And so any vendor out there or any developers that has low code, no code, this is a journey that the government definitely will embrace, and there is a lot of work to be done on that field.
Great, thank you. Well, this has been awesome. Are there any other final thoughts from the panelists? All right, I think we covered a lot of ground. So I just want to thank you guys so much for your great insight. And this was a super fun discussion. I'm glad I got to be a part of it. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, our awesome panelists and our keynote speaker, Ed Daugialo. I would also like to thank our partners again. So thank you to our partners over at Software AG Government Solutions and CompuWare. It's always a pleasure to work with you all. As the working group program manager, I want to encourage everyone who is attending and our panelists as well. I want to invite you, if you're not already, to participate in our working groups at ATARC. We have project teams in various different focus areas such as hyper automation, RPA, low code. There's like 35 of them. So there's definitely a place, to engage if you're not already. And we meet twice a month for the project teams individually, and then once a month at the last week of each month, we have a speaker from the government come in, and we get to ask questions in a more intimate setting where you get to, really get to know one another. So it's a great place for networking opportunities as well. Before we close out today, I would like to share another event that we have on deck for this week. On Thursday, March 4th, from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, ATARC will be hosting our weekly after lunch webinar series. And this week, we are gathering federal IT cloud leaders as they dive into how they reevaluate their agency's technology needs during this pandemic and further strengthen their agency's data capabilities through the use of cloud technologies. So that should be a really interesting discussion. Please go register for that, and we hope to see you there. Thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.